Hey everyone, welcome again to Friday and another edition of Leadership Live, Elevate.Strategy. My name is Simeon Wong, and it's great to have you back this week. So happy when you guys can join us for our Friday interviews. I always look, this is the highlight of my week. All the other 4 or 5 days, of course, the clients are great, etc. But when I get a chance to talk to my guests, that's always a real treat. So. And booking them is always so difficult, right? And today's guest is no exception, obviously, and I'll introduce him in a second. But first, just a very quick update on Elevate. So this week again has been really awesome. We've got a couple of folks in the U.S. that are relocating, etc. And whenever there's a transition from one industry to another, or countries, geographies, there's a lot of coaching need around how do you acclimatize yourself to a new environment, and how do you present yourself in resumes or in interviews, etc. So we have a lot of senior executive movement, and from what I've seen in the market, the postings out there are kind of coming out a little bit faster and furious than before. And I've been asked that a number of times, which industries are stronger than the others, but it really just fluctuates. So anyway, that's not why you guys are here. And I know many of you responded to the earlier this week notification of today's interview with Rob, my guest today. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. If you're here dropping in, just drop a note, let me know, let us know where you're from. It'd be really great. I know Rob has got a lot of supporters that are online right now too as well. And post-broadcast, if you're watching this, please feel free to drop us a line as well. Connect with Rob if you want to on LinkedIn. He's a very, very approachable, friendly guy, and myself as well. All right, so without further ado, I want to introduce my guest today, and his name is Robert Bigler. And you may have seen him in the news. He's one of the big wigs in Canada, as we say. And I'll just introduce him. So he's the general manager of eBay Canada. And as that role, he leads strategy and execution of the Canadian experience for one of the world's largest online marketplaces. And I'm sure all of you guys have used eBay at some point or another, and you know how powerful that is. In this role, he helps connect small businesses to more than 150 million buyers in 190 countries, allowing them to stay local and sell global. Really important, especially in this time of COVID. Prior to eBay, Rob was SVP of Digital Transformation at Holt Renfrew, and has also held senior roles in multiple markets around the world with the Selfridges Group, Sears Canada, Associated British Foods, and Bain and Company. And get this, Rob is also a licensed civil engineer, and he's designed buildings on both coasts of the U.S., and he was also a U.S. Peace Corps volunteer in Guyana, South America, years back. Education, Rob has extremely amazing pedigree. He's got a master's and MBA from Wharton, and also a Bachelor of Science from Stanford University. And he writes down here that in his free time, which I'm not sure he has a lot of, but he enjoys traveling and new adventures with his wife and 4 boys. So without further ado, I'm going to bring him in here, and he'll tell you about himself better than I can. So, Rob, welcome.
Thanks, Simeon. Good to see you, man.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. And I just remember the reason why you're even answering my emails is because we first crossed paths probably about 10 years ago, right? We were saying now, we were both at Sears Canada. So, and I just want to say that my first impression of you, and I think you were leading the strategy group, wasn't that you were smart, but actually that you were nice. You were a nice guy. You were a very friendly guy and genuine. So I really appreciate it about you. And as I was doing this series about Leadership Live, I was thinking about leaders that really would be willing to express their story and tell people about their journey, which is really what this is all about. So thanks again, really appreciate it. And again, for listeners coming in, just feel free to drop a comment in there. If you've got questions for Rob, feel free to ask him. If they're too personal, he won't answer them. So, don't worry about it. In any case, Rob, why don't we start off, for those of you who don't know what a GM does and GM of eBay Canada does, maybe you can kind of walk us through what do you do on a day-to-day basis?
It changes every day. So problem solve, build. I think first I come back to kind of three elements. One is the customers, so really understanding, and it's interesting at eBay because we have buyers and we have sellers. So we've got both sides and we need to appeal to both. So how can we, I'd say, our two of our big goals, one is to, help Canadian buyers find what they're looking for. The other is to help Canadian sellers sell both in Canada and in the US and abroad. Like eBay really provides a marketplace to the world, which is more plus your own website. eBay is that marketplace to the world, which is fun. So one is the customers. I spend time understanding their needs. How can we get ourselves in the marketplace relative to the competition? That comes back to strategy. But it also starts with the customer. My second big thing is around my team. Like if you don't have a good team, you can't get anything done. You can't achieve anything, and it's also no fun.
Right.
So spend a lot of time kind of day to day working with my team, helping them out, building up, processes, skills, etc. within the own team. Team also includes kind of the rest. So eBay Canada, we're the second largest non-grocery e-commerce platform in Canada, right? Like we're 1.5 billion, or we buy and sell. We trade 1.5 billion in Canada, so it's huge. But we've got this massive $101 billion organization that we work with. So that team side that I was talking about is also stakeholder management. Working with these. I talk to Australia. We share best practices. It's like it's the best of both worlds because I got this amazing little team in Canada, and it feels like a startup family. And then this global team that we work with, and honestly, it's helping sellers, so that's fun too. And then the third element is that vision setting. So, what are our strategic priorities? How are we beat the competition? How are we going to win? How are we going to help buyers and sellers connect? So, what's the vision for Canada going to be? Overall vision for eBay, and help the team achieve that.
So you have a Canadian background, obviously, and so the Canadian experience you talked about. So a lot of my guests who are part of a larger conglomerate and they run a business in Canada, they find sort of kind of special challenges of operating in Canada. Some of it is cultural, some of it is the fact that people are distributed in certain cities. What do you find the most challenging about operating a business in Canada?
Well, let's rewind there. I've got Canadian background from the past 11 years. But just like it sounds like a lot of your clients, I'm originally American. Well, from if you can't, Seattle's kind of halfway. But from Seattle, and also lived in the UK for about 9 years before moving to Canada. But I consider myself Canadian now. I've lived here, sworn allegiance to the Queen twice. I think once I broke my leg playing hockey. I'm like, okay, now you're an official Canadian if you broke your leg in hockey. But I think that international perspective actually helps because I can understand, like, you've got to adapt to the needs of your customer no matter where they are, right? And so that gets really tricky there's different needs in none of it relative to Toronto, relative to Montreal, relative to Vancouver. So even within Canada, there's kind of different customer needs, and that's important too. Just acknowledge that it's not a localized approach. We need to think internationally. Then I think if I can go back to the original question about it's tricky being part of a multinational in Canada because, it's like the numbers, we're not the biggest. And so then how do you play that angle? And so I can go down that path if you want me to, but it's like some sides it's good because you get a little more autonomy. On the other hand, it's challenging because you might not get all the product resources that the States gets, or Germany, or the UK, or Australia, some of the other big markets.
So some of my clients have the moving around of continents like you do, and some find the transition harder than others. So what would you say are kind of the 2 or 3 key elements for a leader to have in order to have a successful transition between the US, Canada, UK, or any other country?
Adaptability. I'll go back to that. No country is the same.
Mm-hmm.
Every banking system is a nightmare.
Okay.
You're going in trying to get a credit card. You're like, you don't have credit, but like, I should have credit, but you don't have credit in Canada. Luckily when we were at Sears and I moved to Canada, I went down and talked to the guys running the Sears credit card, and I was able to get a credit card in Canada. So it's hard.
Right.
It's hard, period. But the more adaptable you are, the more, it's going to, if you acknowledge that it's going to be challenging, if you acknowledge that it's going to take time, and that's okay. It's going to be easy on day one, but then, just and be adaptable and pivot and have fun with it. And it's also, any leader, it's the family, it's other things too. Like, it's not just, I'm going to go into the office and this is going to be my job. Like, it's a whole, moving continents is a whole family, cultural immersion, changing friends, changing connections, and everything else. So it's, that element is probably even more important. Just, what's my job? Who's my team? What's my budget? That kind of stuff.
Gotcha. Yeah. And if anyone watching has any questions, or if you've struggled with kind of the transcontinental experience that Rob is talking about, feel free to drop in a line. Be curious to know what your thoughts are. We have a comment here. Banking. Yeah, can't agree more. Yeah, that's the comment. And you never think about that as a consumer. For me, right, when I think about sort of purchasing something on eBay, sometimes I look at it, I'm like, okay, it's sourced not within Canada per se necessarily. So you're like, okay, well, whatever, it doesn't matter. I just pay for it, and that's the kind of the consumer perspective. So let's switch gears a little bit and kind of get to the crux of the purpose of this interview, right? Which is to understand how you got to where you are today, right? So I like to ask the question in reverse. I like to say, so what do you do? And you've explained that, but why do you love what you're doing? And how did you get to where you are today? And you can feel free to kind of weave or whatever it is to share with us. Go as far back as you want. If you want to talk about when you were in kindergarten, it doesn't matter. Just go ahead. It's your show. Go ahead.
Oh boy. All right. Rein me in here. I think first off, no career path is linear. And mine certainly is very nonlinear, which is hard for me as a recovering engineer to acknowledge. So, there's not a set answer. You can't do your problem, and this is what the answer is. Life happens. Things happen. I think a couple of consistent things through my career. It's more that as I look back on now, the common denominator though. One is that I like to build things. I like to problem solve. Right. So that's the consistency. Like, I started out as an engineer building buildings. I love engineering because it was like I have so many interests, and that's one of my problems. I have interests. I'm a big nerd. I'm passionate about a whole bunch of stuff. And civil engineering had a bit of business, a bit of physics, a bit of management, project management, a bit of like big trucks and stuff. And that was all fun. Okay. Things I can wrap up into an environmental side. Sustainability was big. I had a great professor at Stanford, Gil Masters, who was pushing that a long time ago, so anyway, got into it, lots of interest, and then engineering. And then I said, okay, I'm designing these amazing buildings and it's fun, but now I want a new challenge, because I had kind of ramped up pretty quick because I was an engineer who could talk to people. But engineers can't talk to people, but the aspect.
Yeah, I was just about to say. I'm glad you caught yourself there.
I could work with architects and contractors and developers and kind of help them problem solve together in the middle, and that was fun, and I liked that part of it. But I didn't want to be doing the same thing for the next 30 years. So then business school opened the aperture of all these other new things that interested me. And after that, it was consulting, because I kind of saw it as that graduate school for business school, where you have more cases and you're just churning through. And even within consulting, I focused in private equity. And that was even more intense. That was like 3 months of work into 2 weeks. Like more intense. How do you crack the case? How do you get up to speed on an industry? How do you problem solve what the real issues are? How do you build, and then dive in. Mm-hmm. So that was is this the direction you wanted to go, Simeon?
Yeah, no, you know what? Listeners are listening in with bated breath. Yeah, this is the kind of stuff that people don't. Yeah,
I don't know about that. I'll keep going.
Okay, you're becoming more and more Canadian as we speak, because you're apologizing. You're kind of for example, I just learned that you were doing private equity in business school, which I understand now why you went to Selfridges in the end, right? So I get that it's all this kind of internet. But keep going. I love the story. Keep going. Yeah.
And it just keeps going, and so pivoting on problem solving, and so then I ended up from private equity. I did post merger integration. I left consulting because I like to get in and do. It can do, don't get me wrong, but I wanted to own and do and work more on that for a long period of time. So I ran a post-merger integration, which went really well. They offered me a role. I said I'm not ready for a role. The other element to it, side story, there's career and there's life, right? And there's a balance.
For sure.
And for me, that balance is super important. Like, people ask me what I do, and my first response is not that I'm general manager of eBay Canada. My first response is I'm a dad. Like, I've got 4 boys. I'm a husband. And I am general manager of eBay Canada. Don't get me wrong. Like, everything together, and that's super important to me to keep that balance. My wife is incredible, and she's a professional as well. And so, like, our careers and how do we go? So actually, that post-merger would have led to a role, but I said, you know what? Lindsay's going back to work after a mat leave. I took a career break then. And that was great for me. It was good for her. And I took a career break for a while. And that was
that's great.
The whole balance of everything. And then I jumped into Associated British Foods, which was a big conglomerate. I actually probably did more strategy ABF than I did at Bain, because we had...
Rob, let me just pause there 1 second. I just wanted to go back to something you said earlier about that balance. Was there someone that you, growing up, that you saw that was a role model for you that kind of set that stage, or was it something that you just kind of one day woke up and said, this is a value that I find is tremendously important to me? Like, where did that come from?
It was probably my parents. Like, I'll go back to that. Both my parents worked, both of them, we kind of came up. They had to work. I was the oldest, and I had my sister and my brother, and you see them working. Like, they were great parents, and they would balance. Like, my mom she was a nurse. She'd figure out how could she work nights, and then my dad would be home, and then and so how could they balance it? So for sure, it goes back to my folks. I would say that's the heart of it. And also, just there's nature versus nurture. I think it's a part of who I am too.
Yeah, no, for sure. And the reason why I asked that is because it kind of took COVID for people to start thinking more about what that actually means, the balance. And a lot of executives are kind of caught off guard by that, because when they were kind of forced to be in the same room in the house as their kids, they all of a sudden had this conflict where it's like, hey, I actually enjoy this time here. But at the same time, I always thought that work-life balance meant something different, right? It meant coming back home, not taking my phone with me, going to, dinner. And so that's the hard part, is that's the whole dilemma of going back to the office for work post-COVID, right? Do I really want to do that? So, and I would encourage, anyone who's listening to kind of think about kind of what the value system is for you. And you've got some accolades there. Yeah, I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm a GM of eBay Canada. Yeah, and in my LinkedIn profile, I'm a proud father and husband, but I'm not as noble as you. I kind of put that at the end of my tag, but nonetheless, it's absolutely true. Okay, so keep on going. So you were saying that the pedigree, you're talking about kind of the transition there. Just keep on going. Sorry.
So I was at Associated British Foods, amazing position, great company. Was reporting to the CEO there. Huge portfolio around the world, like Twinings Tea, Ovaltine, Primark, Kingsmill Bread. So great CPG portfolio. Reporting, actually, it's an interesting story, because I was reporting to a guy named George Weston, who's cousins to Galen, or Galen Senior's nephew. So anyway, that was an awesome experience, but I was still doing strategy. I'm like, I want to get my hands dirty. I want to get in. And I was probably as a strategy consultant. I don't know how many of those you have as clients. I mean, it was hard to make the transition. Like, how do I get that label off my back that he's the strategy guy into more of he's the get stuff done guy. He's the operator. He's the deliver results guy, which is what I more want to be. So that took a while. But then life hits. My wife and I had 3 kids by that point, and we said we wanted to move to Canada. We wanted to raise them in Canada. That was important to us, and so we just uprooted. We both quit our jobs. Well, she was on maternity leave with our third at the time, and we moved to Toronto. And that's when I found the role at Sears, where I was VP of strategy and PMO. I like to think of it as the team that thinks of stuff and gets stuff done.
And does it. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Your dream job.
Yeah, it was fun. Think of the good stuff and get it done, working with the rest of the organization. And that was fun. Amazing team. Turbulent times, as you would remember, Simeon. That's where we bumped into each other. Crazy time. And then, I'm a builder, and I saw what the board wanted to do with business. And that was probably the hardest thing to do, was to lead that team. That was a great team. I'm so proud of that team that we had built at Sears. And they're all doing amazing things now, and I'm still in touch. But leaving the team was tough. Strategically, the board wasn't going to push the business. I'm a builder. I don't want to do the other side of it. That was when I left, and then joined the Selfridges Group, which is owned by the Weston family. But Selfridges, which is the best department store in the world, sister Holt Renfrew in Canada, sister with Brown Thomas in Ireland, sister with Devine Corf in Holland. So it was fun. It was amazing. It was problem solving. I helped them set up. They weren't a group to begin with. So how do we set up a group? What's the role of the group and the role of the sister? Because they had all been operating independently. We turned around, like we had 36 luxury department stores, and we're bigger than Saks, and kind of had the Westons kind of had no structure to share best practices. So setting that up was super fun. And I think it helped too that I had literally lived 2 blocks away from Selfridges when I lived in the UK. So I went back to my old hood. I was living in Toronto, but doing work with Selfridges, and just having perspective on Ireland and Holland and the international components, and having lived in Japan and understanding the luxury consumer was fun. So it's like my career path is nonlinear, but then all the elements start to come together when you think of being general manager of eBay Canada, and you're like, okay, well, I've lived in Japan, and this was the experience there. Or I've lived in South America, and this is the experience there. I've lived in the UK. Not that it mattered. You can still understand it if you haven't lived there, but Selfridges, it helped that I'd seen that and lived in those places. And then it was all pushing to digital, all pushing to omni. Like, we got to get going. We got to get going. And I was helping Holtz, in fact. Like, I then moved straight from the group. So I spent 5 years with the organization, but in different roles, and then moved right into Holt Renfrew for a while to try and help them switch to omni. But then I wanted to go full into digital, which brought me to eBay about 3.5 years ago.
Right. I mean, and all the while you're building, right? You're building something.
Yeah.
It is rare to have a combination of the strategic mindset and also the ability to execute, right? And that's sort of the tension always in consulting is, okay, if I continue down this path here, do I get to own a P&L? Do I get to own the business, right? Just going back quickly to kind of teams. So we have a question here for you about how do you keep your team motivated despite conflicts, obstacles, and pandemic and the pandemic?
That's a good question.
I didn't plant that question, by the way, but maybe I didn't.
Either way, it's a fantastic question. I think I'll say 3 things. First off is just acknowledgement, right? Like,
okay,
it sucks. Like, I miss my team. I miss seeing people. It's hard. You got pressures from family, you got parents, you got cousins, can I see my parents? Can I not? Like, so number 1 is acknowledgement that it's hard. Like, listening to people, listening to their problems, listening to where they're at. Is super important. And we did that across my team. I I want to do it more is just one-on-ones with the whole team. It's one-on-ones with the whole team. The management team, I'll check in with them. We make sure the management team's checking in with their team. So just listening and acknowledgement is number one. I think number two is helping set a vision and a purpose. And it has to be repeated, but eBay didn't really get to eBay at the end there, but eBay's the best company. Well, there's amazing things about every company I've worked for, but I love working for eBay because it is a purpose organization. Like when the company was founded 26 years ago, like Pierre founded it with the principle and the purpose to empower people and create economic opportunity. And honestly, people live by that. I think having that purpose behind us has helped us all through the pandemic. It helped me through the pandemic. Like when Canadian small businesses were having to close their doors, the whole team jumped in and we've got to help. And so we parked our fees, pushed off the fees, said, no, we'll give you free store subscriptions. We'll, defer your fees for months. And this is how you get up. We set up an up and running program. My whole team rallied and said, okay, this is the up and running program. How can we these components and build it? What kind of a promo can we give? They're in tough financial situation. And we helped a ton of Canadian small businesses get online, and that helped. So having a purpose totally helped. And even in talking to the sellers, now they realize, oh my gosh, like, why wasn't I on eBay? I can sell to the world. It's not cannibalizing my existing sales. It's not that hard to be on eBay. I can integrate through AIs with my existing platform so I don't bump into inventory issues. I think that purpose helped us all through because there was a greater good. There was a higher cause that all of us were dialing into Zoom for. And that was and then I'd say
is having. Sorry, I was just going to say about purpose. One of the things that I try to coach the executives that I work with on is there's 4 things to value proposition, right? To me, there's skills that you bring to the table. There's the passion or the purpose behind what you're doing. There's the impact, right? Where do you have the most impact is where you should be, right? And there's non-negotiables, like the convictions that you have. So how important is that purpose, that passion for you? Like how much of your career has been, I guess kind of skipping ahead, but has been sort of driving you forward, right? That's a bad purpose kind of sets you back and says, you know what, I don't work here anymore, versus a good purpose, which says, I have to be here. This is non-negotiable.
Yeah, I think I had underestimated the importance of purpose in my prior roles. Okay. So when I left Sears, that was part of it. Was I couldn't agree with what was going to happen. Gazing into my crystal ball, I couldn't agree with that. That was why I made the decision. And so, but then it was more, how can I find a fun, I can do a lot of problem solve and have an impact. Now, if I were out there looking for a role, what's the purpose of the company? And does that align with my values and what I believe in? And eBay's purpose there is awesome. I also, for years, even since I was a kid, the eco-groovy side of me is, that's important. Sustainability is important. And eBay has been a part of the circular, eBay brought the circular economy online, that refurbished, the reused, the pre-loved inventory. So eBay supports small businesses and is environmentally friendly. And, it's just those purposes aligned. And I think that's key. And if I can go back to that question you had up there, Simeon, the third point I was going to make is I make sure there's space to have fun. I've got the team's incredible. We've got a small, scrappy Canadian team that made billions of sales on the site, and the social committee is amazing. The events that we have are super fun, even though we've been virtual. We had a guy who used to be a chef, and he did this phenomenal cooking lesson for us. So the team sent out materials to all the houses, and we had this cooking thing. My kids got into it, and that was fun. We did a Pride run. We were sponsor of Pride Run Toronto, and the whole team. We set up a account on Strava, and so that also got people out exercising and just talking talking smack on on our Slack channels and everything, and being a bit competitive was super fun too. So I guess overall, it's, listen and acknowledge is number one. Number two, clear purpose during these challenging times. And number three is like, make sure there's time to have fun. And make sure you're too, in that first point about listening and acknowledging, is like, I tell my team, like, go home, turn off the computer. Take time for you, especially when it's right there. So you go to the office, and that would be a separate, like, there's a physical separation. But I tell the team, like, and if you got to turn off the middle of the day to go shopping or to work out, that's fine. Like, work your schedule. I trust you guys. Trust is big too, and I trust them completely. And I know that they're working their butts off.
Yeah. I saw this posting that's kind of been circulating, I guess, on Facebook. And it was a sort of a tweet that said something like, from an executive that said, I care more that your daughter has an ear infection than I'm taking time off for 2 hours for personal leave. Right. So the point was that, humanity is so important. Life, the aspects of life that we all go through, we should sort of cause other people to care about that. And we should care about that ourselves, especially as a leader, as you were saying before, that, extends the compassion element of things, which I think in the end extends to the purpose, right? That's kind of like the whole thing that you're talking about there. Gotcha. Yeah. So getting to where you were there then, you hadn't finished your story there. I think you were talking about Selfridges, and then you're saying now you're at eBay. I had a question for you, is maybe slanted a little bit more towards the technical, and anybody who's watching wants to ask, that's fine too. But what's the biggest challenge as far as like moving from the bricks and mortar to digital? Because again, the relevance here, so from a career perspective, is a lot of my executives in retail, they have an existential crisis, because the question is my skill set still valid for the future? And so, like, how does that work out for you? Like, do you ever think about your skill set, and how do you stay on top of things and that transformation over there? Like, tell me about that experience.
I think actually I would answer that coming back to this question you asked before about moving country. Right? It's some of the same components. It's an acknowledgement that it's going to be hard. It's an acknowledgement that you don't know everything, right? And that you're going to have to learn new customs, new languages, and adapt. But I think overarching that is the need to have confidence in your own abilities, that your intuition that you as an executive have developed over years is probably right. Like, I've learned more and more to follow I'm a big time geek and nerd, and I want to see the numbers all the time. But there's also a gut check, and there's higher level understanding of value prop and differentiation and strategy, and how do you get things done. And that third element of trust yourself, as you move into a new country, as you move into a new industry, or move into tech, like the digital world that we're in now, that strength will see you through the challenges of starting up. So every company has a different language. I've worked at a lot of different companies. eBay is the worst. There are so many 3-letter acronyms. So it's digital, plus there's the eBay language. So it's like moving. It is similar to moving to a foreign country, because you've got to learn a new language. But the principles are the same. The principles of people buying things and selling things and understanding your differentiation relative to the competition, those principles are the same whether you're going digital or whether you're, a farmer in Latin America, or selling fruit. It's like the principles are the same. So double down on what you've learned from your other experiences, because actually it will serve you well. But you have to learn language. You have to learn how it works, and how, what's the difference between SEO and SEM, and what's the role of social, and how does all this interplay with each other, and where's the traffic coming from, and does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. When you think about, so you're talking about the career being kind of windy, and yours definitely has been. For a lot of people, a windy career has not been very successful, right? It's actually been fraught with a lot of challenges, obstacles. Maybe it's taken a little bit of time for them to find out their superpower, right? Their strengths. in your career kind of trajectory, can you share about maybe one time or two times that you made a wrong decision and something that kind of put you in a bad spot? And, go into as much detail as you want. This can be just between us, no one's watching.
Everyone's watching.
but
Sorry,
and what did you, no, I mean, let's be real. Those questions were all planted. Anyway, you share something about a struggle. You can't be that smart, Rob, as smart as you are.
Look, history is written by the victors, I guess. So like my history, like you can adapt it. Like I said before, I was bouncing around a little, and it wasn't until after the fact that I looked back and I saw like the common denominator was building things. Right? Like when I was in Peace Corps, I was an urban youth volunteer. I had 2 degrees in engineering from Stanford. I wasn't doing engineering. I was doing youth work, but it was building up kids. Right. And it was building up local communities, and it was helping them believe in themselves and the self-esteem with that. So it was building and builders, right, and then building companies. But I didn't realize that until afterwards. So my retroactive historical analysis of it says, oh, I'm a builder. Going through it, I was like, my parents were like, what are you doing? You just paid for this Stanford education. You're going off to the Peace Corps to work with kids. Like, what is that all about? And then you get malaria, and then you get medevaced, and then you lose like 50 pounds, and you're about to die. So yeah, my parents didn't like that.
But you haven't answered the question about a time where you made a bad decision and put you in a bad spot. Now it's okay if you don't answer that, but have you struggled through certain periods of your life where it's like, hey, do I really belong here? And actually related to that is a lot of times I've been saying to executives that in order to focus in on what you're really good at, you kind of have to shed off things that you're not that good at, or things that, what you could get better at, but you really don't care about. Right. So did you ever have those shedding off moments where you're like, you know what, I have to make a choice now. I love building, but I also love this, but I'm going to have to give up a little bit on this. Like, have you ever had to make that kind of sacrifice?
I'm trying to think.
And that's okay.
I'm super happy with like where I'm at, and the position I have, and the fun I have with the team, and the purpose. So it's hard to say, was there a mistake? Because path, maybe I would not be where I am today. And so it's a tough question. Look, every job has just awful moments. Even the best jobs have a tough moment where you're like, what am I doing here? And that's tricky. And in those moments, I try, maybe I'm too optimistic. My wife thinks I'm too positive sometimes, but it's
not a bad thing.
Kind of where is the grass is greener. So like at Sears, things were tough. Like you remember those days, like sales were declining. The board was all over us. The CEO was all over us. Like we were getting screamed at left, right, and center. Like it sucked. And so rather than dwell on the negative, I pivoted to like, yeah, my team's amazing. Look at these guys, like let's figure out like, how can we support each other? How can we figure out your career path and your career development? And, you want to do marketing? Here, work on this project and then go do marketing. And so how do you, in the midst of those struggles, because every job has those struggles and those challenges, how do you find those nuggets around and say, well, this is where I'm going to go into and find fulfillment from, and find the positive in the situation from. I know I'm probably not answering the question directly, but does that make sense?
No, I think you touched on a word there that's very important, which is optimism. It's optimism is something that I've seen a lot in certain people that just are naturally, innately born that way, right? My mom is one of those people who you put her in any situation, and she's a physicist by background as well, but I don't know if there's any commonality between the smarts, but you put any situation and she'll find a way out. She'll find like the light at the end of the tunnel, right? In your case, it was a bad work situation, not good in sales, but hey, let's look around and see what is good, right? And kind of be optimistic about that. And that's something that I encourage a lot of folks to try to look around and see what is good, right? What is good, and try to focus on that to drive them through that period of time. What is a non-negotiable for you, Rob? You said culture, something you said life balance. So what is a conviction of yours that no matter what, if that's going to be a deal breaker if something isn't there?
There's a lot. Come back to values. There's certain industries I just won't work in. If I think they're leading people down the wrong path, I think that's important to my own values. Lots of different deal breakers in there. I also think I now feel like a deal breaker is I need to be in a position where I can be building things. I don't want to be in, and they make a lot of money doing it, but, private equity or some of the funds, like they make a lot of money exiting companies, and so that's just not me. It's no disrespect to them. There's value in it for sure, but it's just not what I want to do. It's not what motivates me or what I'm going to do. So, and also work-life balance is now important. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I was in consulting. I worked some crazy hours, and I work hard with eBay. Like, I work hard with the team for sure, but work-life balance is also now a non-negotiable, where I'm not going to work. I'm not going to kill myself for my family now anymore. There's balance to life, and there needs to be balance for life. So,
yeah, and
Cedric.
Yeah, hello, sir. Glad you a fellow alumni.
Yeah, the old Sears days. Good to hear from you, Cedric.
Yeah, he says thank you so much for the opportunity for this. Yeah, and he echoes what I saw about you too, Rob, which is the first thing I saw was a great leader because you were nice, you were a kind person at heart, and giving people an opportunity. So, all right, so you are one of the rare breeds that I've found who are you're actually, your superpower is to intuitively find a way out. And the way out is always going to be driven by optimism and hope, right? There's something beyond this that you can get through, no matter how tough it gets going. What would you say to others who might have a problem doing that? So optimism is something that is your go-to. What other things have you seen, for example, in your team, where they're really good at certain things, their attributes about their personality, whatever it is, that helps them get through difficult times? So what suggestions would you give to some people who are going through a tough time right now, who can't see the light?
It's a good one. Try something new. Is a good one. And whether it's as simple as, that's why I wish our office isn't open, but sometimes it's even as simple. Like, there are times when I have just been stuck on a problem and I go to a coffee house and just a change of scenery or a change of something just breaks my mental barriers and mental challenges. Just be careful, because there was one point where I had the entire strategy of ABF spread in this back corner of a coffee shop, and the CEO walked in. I was like, "Hey," not that anyone was able to see it, but he's like, "What are you doing here?"
Right.
So,
well, you know what? It's a cheaper offsite, Rob, than taking them to the palace, right? So I think he probably appreciated the cost savings in that. That's the optimism part.
Yeah, I'm from Seattle. I default to a coffee house, right? Like, that's just what I've got to do. But it's also changing your role to some degree. Like, we have a couple people on the team who have changed their roles. It's hard to do, but and that also helps with things. Work on something different, so you're not doing the same thing day in, day out. I think it helps to do that. So optimism, change the scenery, either physically or kind of what you're working on, helps. Other people have found outlets. We've got people on the team. You sure binge watching stuff, but we talk about what are the best shows to binge watch, people getting into reading. Plants, we've got some amazing horticulturalists on the team who are swapping stories and selling their plants, trying to sell their plants on eBay as well. Or other hobbies that are coming up during the pandemic. Some cool hobbies have come up, and eBay is a great place to shop for your hobbies.
That's actually I was going to ask you, Rob, have you ever sold anything on eBay?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
All right. I don't know.
Yeah.
What have you sold? What are some items that I can pick up from Rob Bigler?
Well, it's more my to-do list because so I've got 4 boys, and okay, it's September 17th. October 31st is coming. 4 boys generates a lot of pre-loved Halloween costumes. The next big challenge is to get a whole bunch of Halloween costumes up and running. I've sold old chairs on eBay. I've sold trading cards. I've got some sneakers now that are for sale. Yeah, my kids love like getting their Pokemon selling. I've got a whole stack of Pokemons that I printed up. Those are selling really well. I can keep my solo card. I was very excited to get that one. I've got some really cool authenticated sneakers over here.
You know, I thought I just realized that's the benefit of being an insider. You know what's trending, right? You can tell all your friends like this is like it's sort of a sort of the insider information. But anyway, let's not go there. Maybe there's something that's sensitive there. I didn't realize.
No, it's all good. It's fun. It's fun.
Just stepped into a puddle. Okay, so I wanted to ask you that, and then you're saying try something new, right? Try something different, switch roles. Yeah, and I think part of the problem is that, and anyone who's watching, if you've experienced the same thing too, I'd love to hear your experiences, but it's an imposter syndrome, right? It's like, I've never done that before, so how in the world is anyone going to ever hire me to do that? Or where do I get the credibility to do that on my team, right? So how does one build themselves up to doing something different?
What I've found is don't try and pivot on multiple axes at the same time.
Okay.
Right? So you can't change industries at the same time you're changing roles. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like well, you can, but I think that's the stretch. So take something that you've kind of been doing and pivot that way. Right? So I took strategy from ABF into strategy at Sears, added operational with the PMO at Sears, and then moved into arguably similar, although more strategy with Whittington and Selfridges Group. But then I was there, then I could build operational. Like at Holt's, I was in charge of IT. I was in charge of more of the operations. And then I switched companies, but I'd been doing operations at Holt's with the digital transformation, where I had the enablement and the digital transformation and Omni and everything else there. So I had that. Switch companies, do operations, but now I'm switching one step from retail fully into digital and technology. But I started at eBay doing operations, where I was COO for Canada and LATAM when I started.
Right.
COO, and then I pivot into general manager. Right. So it's kind of, and then like moving countries, it was almost, the country was the pivot. Right? So like moving from the UK to Canada, arguably you could say that move was more into retail than I was before, although ABF did own Primark, which is like fast fashion, H&M, Zara, in Europe. So I'd done a little bit of retail. So, but I was strategy to strategy, changing countries.
Right.
Does that kind of make sense, where you're not pivoting on, take what you do know and then pivot it. Like if you're in financial now, try and learn more now about tech, and then you pivot around tech into tech retail, or you pivot around retail into, you know what I mean? Like it's
it's
I don't know. I haven't read any books on that, Simeon. You would know about it, but that seems to kind of be, don't try and do too much change at the same time about yourself and doing.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. It is a stepwise movement, and it takes time. Right. And that's something that a lot of folks don't realize, that, you know, we look at people's careers like yourself, but there are juncture points where you've had to wait, right? There's a patience involved with waiting for the right moment, the right role, the right company, the right responsibilities. And so it's a stepwise. In your career life, if you were to spend one day with any business executive or leader in the world, who would it be and why? Yourself.
No, myself. Like there's elements from everybody, you know, like there's certain things that Jobs did with Apple that are amazing, but other things that I honestly don't respect at all.
Sure.
You could go back to some of the others. I get a full day
It's a combination.
with eBay.
So let's say you had a Jedi.
Full day with eBay CEO. I'd lobby hard for the Canadian team. That's what I would do.
All right, that's fair. That's fair. Sure. I'm in Toronto. I'm Canadian fully, but I work with a lot of global folks. You're talking about pivoting on small things and kind of taking stepwise. And in my journey, I gave a TED talk last year about using failure as a bit of a pivot point. And really, it's the same concept, right? Because when you fail, you can't take the whole thing and just put it on your shoulders. You got to break it down and say, I wasn't really good at this, but then I have to ask, do I really care about that, right? If I don't care about that, then let's just throw that out and pivot around something else. And to the point where I started out in consulting, and I did 22 years of that of it corporate, and I found out that I'm more people than I am project. That's my motto. And I'm going to ask you the same thing, but my motto is I'm more about people developing, enabling than I am about projects. And so, yeah, that's and it's hard, right? I'm sure you've seen your fair share of leaders in your team who are kind of going through a bit of that ideation crisis about where they should go next. And it's great, like Cedric said, that you're giving them chances to kind of change and as opposed to staying status quo. Gotcha. Okay. I suppose there's always this element. There's two elements that come up a lot in this particular broadcast. Number one is having mentors. And mentors in your life, people that have meant a lot to you, who have given you an opportunity, who have taught you the ropes. And number two is the support, the structure of the family support, right? Which you answered a little bit earlier on today about you and your wife. And you can kind of park that aside too. But the role of mentor, tell me about people who you mentioned. There's a professor at Stanford who is very integral for that. What other mentors have there been in your life? What have they taught you? That kind of a thing.
It's a good question. I struggle with this one. I know I should have more mentors. And I find that maybe it's because I've moved countries way too many times, moved careers, shifted jobs. I don't have the established mentor kind of a network per se. But what I've found in mentorship is connections, like not as a mentor per se, but connections, leaders that I respect. Like mentor seems like such a big kind of loaded word. Like my best mentor, partner, support is my wife, 100%. Like she's my mentor, she's my support. We both support each other and talk about, the business problems, the team problems, like what's going on. She is super smart, like ton of respect for her, like. And so we have a good time kind of. My friend used to joke around. I was like, you don't go for a romantic getaway, you go for an offsite.
Right. Yeah.
It's bad, but like we met at business school. She is Canadian. She's incredible.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, she's worked all over the place too. Like she did an exchange in Japan, in France, in Australia. And then we lived in the UK for a long time. So both of us are very international, but I 100%, she's my mentor, my partner, my friend, my support, kind of everything.
So what's a typical day like in the life of the Bigler household? You wake up in the morning, in school, post-COVID or pre-COVID.
So it's Lindsay goes into the office. She's in banking, and so she gets up early to be in before the markets open. I will work in the morning. I'm an early riser. I've always been, even when I was on the crew, before I was on the crew team, I was the annoying happy guy in the morning on the crew team. So I'm an early riser. I get up at 5:30 and I haven't set an alarm in years. So I work in the morning. So I work until the kids get up at 7, and then the kids get up. And like I do the dishes, I feed them breakfast, get them to school, the 4 boys. And then right now they go off to school and I log into Zoom. And then, they come home, the 2 youngest guys walk the dog. Sometimes I end up on call because I was with San Jose, with Silicon Valley. Sometimes I end up on calls while doing the carpools. There are many times I've been at the hockey rink doing calls with Silicon Valley. What's that background? Oh, it's the TV. But it's how you have to manage things. And then hopefully we always want to have dinner together. Like that's important for us, to have dinner together, hear how everybody's day was. And then either we're off to hockey and robotics and different evening activities, or, we can sit around and play games and do kind of that. And then probably to bed, clean up the house and get to bed. Wow. Start all over.
Right. Yeah. It sounds pretty normal. No, I mean, no, actually, the support of the family has been a constant theme throughout this, the process when we talk about people's careers. The public sees you as the face of eBay, and you're there as the representation, but the day-to-day aspect of things, I think most people don't realize that the structures and kind of the timing and the coordination is still the same, right? For everybody it is. So, it's great to see that human side of what happens there. I have a question here that someone came in and said, the question was, what country do you want to land after Canada? Now, you could stay. I'm still with you, all right? So I'm not incriminating you. It's not.
No. I'm open. I love Canada. I'm a Canadian. I love Canada. The question is where in Canada? Like I love the city of Toronto and like how international it is. And I love it is kind of outdoorsy. I've still got that Seattle Pacific Northwest at heart. So like Vancouver would be fun. I would love to up the Inland Passage to Alaska someday. And then we've taken the boys to, oh my gosh, like Cape Breton is beautiful out there. Halifax is a great city. eBay did a big partnership with the city of Halifax called Retail Revival, where we helped a lot of small businesses in Halifax. I had just fun, good people out east. And my wife's family's got roots back in Winnipeg too. And, we've been out to the lakes out there and everything. So it will be in Canada. I'm just not sure where in Canada we will eventually end up.
Gotcha. And we're going to move into the final kind of 10 minutes or so, which are rapid fire questions, which you don't know about. But before we get to there, the question I have for you is, do you have a motto in life? Something that you go by? That for me, it's people, not projects. Do you have one?
Have fun and do the right thing, I guess. I'm just thinking, what do I always tell my boys?
Right.
Try hard, have fun, be nice. If it's anything, it's that. Make sure you live a life well lived and don't just sit there watching TV.
Gotcha. Okay, well that's great. We've had a couple of very strange models come through. Hold on a second. All right, someone wants to go back a little bit here. You talked about tough times at Sears. How did you manage yourself through those days and maintain sanity in your life? Okay.
It was hard. Sunil said, like, it was definitely hard. And those were probably the hardest times from a family perspective too, because that had pulled at my wife. She was at home. We had just moved to Canada. So we were going through all the challenges of moving countries, like trying to figure it out, trying to get into the schools and everything else. She had a baby, like all sorts of just challenges. So it was super hard. I feel like I started to set boundaries for myself too. And the team will remember this. Like I set boundaries for which GO train I was going to catch home. And I was going to be on that GO train. Like follow me down, and they would. You've got the session with Rob from his desk to the elevator. You've got the elevator. You've got, and there. I remember, like Spencer would walk with me all the way to the GO station. Like we would, like members of the team would walk me to the GO station. I even did an interview on the GO train with Alan. Had like different, like, because it was like I'm not going to compromise on getting home to see the family, because that's where I'm going to get my strength from, and they need my strength too. Like it's both. So it's a good question, but I had to start setting more boundaries for myself than I had seen, like in my consulting days, when like, sure, yeah, I just worked a 90-hour week. I'll work another 90-hour week, but I didn't have kids then. So setting those boundaries was super important, but the team worked with it. Like, they figured out how to follow me to Union Station and sometimes follow me home on the train.
Yeah. Well, you've made it. Okay. So, you've made it when you don't have to open Excel anymore. Okay. And you've made it when you have people running with you to this train station to get your time. Like, can you imagine?
Open Excel. I have Excel open right now.
Can you imagine the calendar says 9 to 9:10, right? From Sears office to the Union Station. That's the fine set of mine, and you have to set up to this 5-minute buffer you need beforehand, right, to get with Rob. So that's great. Okay. All right. So we're coming up in the hour. So I'm just going to ask you there's a couple other comments came through, but okay. Some rapid fire. Your alter ego profession. If you were not doing what you're doing, what would you be doing?
Camp counselor.
Camp counselor. Okay.
Yeah.
Why is that?
I still love the outdoors. I love setting up teams and teams. I was a camp director leading sea kayak trips up in the San Juan Islands. It's besides eBay, it's honestly probably one of the most fun jobs. My kids, well, I've basically got my own cabin now. I've got here. My team makes fun of me for being too much of a camp counselor sometimes, but it was fun.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'd love to have been in that cabin because you're a builder. And I think by nature, anyone who's in the nature, it needs to be a builder. Okay, so Rob? What is one word that you love? One word.
Results.
Oh, okay. I hope your team has heard that.
Yeah, they've heard it. They heard it when I was COO. When I took over as GM, I asked one of the team members, "What's the most important thing?" And he wrote that everything else, the package, the vision, everything else, but I like results.
Right. Gotcha. What is one word that you hate?
Bureaucracy.
Okay. And why is that? Have you had a lot of that? I mean, Sears, Holt Renfrew. Let's not get too incriminating here.
eBay is not a bureaucracy at all. Well, I understand why it has to exist. I have created it many times myself. And so there's good bureaucracy, there's bad bureaucracy. Checks and balances are super important. So I will caveat the word by saying a inefficient bureaucracy would be more the appropriate word. eBay, actually, I found there's some frustrations, but I find overall that it is actually a pretty efficient system and bureaucracy with an appropriate checks and balances. But there are others that I've worked with that can be more challenging.
I think, Rob, the only reason why we can talk about that company is because something's happened to it. So anyway, my last question for you is, what is one COVID hobby or habit or hobby that you've developed?
Well, what was super fun was like when all 6 of us were in the house on video, I would break in the afternoon and the boys and I would go into the woods and basically play a game they call manhunt, but it's like tag. So it's like just running like wild through the woods, and it's and so that was a habit that we would go do that. It's camouflage, it's speed, is it, where do you hide? Are you moving? And anyway, it was fun. So having fun with the boys. I don't know if that's a hobby, Simeon, but it was something I was doing just to get outside and get a change.
How old's your youngest son?
The youngest is now 9. So 9,
okay.
11, 13, 15.
Okay. Wow. You're busy.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Rob. It's top of the hour. I want to respect your time. But it's been really great catching up with you and chatting with you. And, you've been tremendously successful. Really proud of you, especially since the last time we spoke on those grounds. And, I wish you all the success and best. And, hopefully we'll have you on the show again. So you mentioned, by the way, Spencer. I'm trying to get him on the show too. So, Spencer, if you're watching,
continent is he on right now? Like
I have no idea, but I'm calling him out right now. Spencer, if you're watching,
last I heard he was in China somewhere, but I know like he speaks Dutch and Spanish and everything else, so he could be somewhere else. I don't know.
Yeah, answer my email, Spencer. All right. Thank you so much. Just stay behind. I'm going to put you on backstage for a second. We'll connect after. All right, thanks. All right, that was wonderful. As usual, a great interview. Had a great time. The chat element of this forum is such a blessing to me. It's ever since I think March, if you've been following, every Friday I've been having a guest on, almost every Friday. And Rob by far is one of those guys where you can not talk to him for many years and just sit back down with him. It's like, it's awesome to kind of hear a successful business leader, but talk a little bit about sort of the background behind how he got here. So if you're going through transitions, if you're going through sort of, especially as an executive senior person who might feel some confidence issues around how to go next step, take some words of counsel there about stepwise pivoting and thinking about how do you have confidence in yourself and setting boundaries. But the world's full of opportunities. Optimism is something that came up several times, and I just really encourage you to stay on track and keep on there. Right. Anyway, so have a good weekend, guys, and I'll see you again